Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision. It's that moment in time in your business or your life where you need some help on the next steps. In this podcast, we help entrepreneur organization members with how to go about doing a proper deep dive in form to get the most value. And if you watch episode 1, we covered correct deep dive presentation styles and strategies on how to give a proper deep dive so you can get something out of your form experience when you're dealing with that tough decision. In this episode, we're going to talk about coaching the deep dive. The deep dive coaching process is something that many people get a ton of value out of during that process, but it's always good to really learn how to properly be coached and what it looks like to be a coach. And today we have Colton Mulligan here joining us once again with Eric Jackson, 15-year EO member. I'm Robert Hartline, 8 years in EO. And Colton, you come to us with a different level of experience because you've got some formal training, buddy, right? Talk about your validate why you're here today.
I love that. Valid, my love language is words of affirmation, and you guys didn't know that that's what I'm here for in this podcast. I just want validation.
We all want validation, buddy.
So that's why we're in EO. I've been trained through Ellie Bird, what I like to call the mother of EO, as a forum Sherpa. And so over the last 4 years, I've worked with hundreds of EO, YPO, and Harvard Business School forum members on facilitating retreats, getting to the 5%, vision, values planning, et cetera. And I just got into the EO official certified trainer program. I'm not official yet. I got to go through boot camp in February, and sometimes they cut people from that. So there's 8 of us.
I don't feel like you're getting cut.
How many pull-ups can you do?
These days, maybe 100. I don't,
Okay.
If you can do 100, I'd like to see it. If I had one right now, I'd be calling you out on that.
It's been a while since I've done CrossFit, but yeah, sure. They're all kipping.
So basically what you're saying is you're available for hire.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so that goes for all forms out there in the EO universe that could be watching. We have somebody with an expert that could come in and give some life into that form. And we all have experienced that. Once you got that retreat done, you get back and you're in, month 8, 9, 10, and you're just not coming out of that form experience with any level of energy, right? Or you kind of come away with, did I really get out enough for my investment of time? Maybe you need a little steroid shot. Bring Colton in, come and whip everybody up into shape, and next thing you know, you're back on track, right?
I didn't know I was getting such a plug today.
Dude, this is such a plug, man.
This is fantastic.
Yeah. Click the link below. Okay.
Click here. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Go ahead and book today. Anyway.
So, well, let's talk about this. This episode's all about coaching. And my first form experience, I did not have we called it at the time presentations, but we now call them deep dives. And if you watch episode 1, you'll see that some of the terms have changed, and that's why he's here, to really re-educate us on terminology to use in form. But the best value I got was being coached. And I went into my particular deep dive with my coach with one intent. And then I realized it went a lot deeper through the coaching process. Talk about, number one, why would you even bother having a coach in the first place for that deep dive?
Also, to open, I'd love to give some facts to back exactly what you said. So when we do a forum health survey before we go on, I go facilitate a retreat, one of the questions is, how much value are you getting from presentations? What's your takeaway value from that? Do you feel like you're going deep, et cetera? It's a couple of the questions. Forums that have been together 10 years, commonly they'll have this where I'm just not getting the value of it. And then subsequently, I don't feel like we're going deep enough. So there is There is actual data from 20,000 surveys at this point through Forum Sherpa where they acknowledge that those things they ebb and flow with how much value people are getting out of presentations. So at least I just want to give some facts to back up what you were saying there.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And by having a coach during that, you're really serving the entire forum. It's not just the person that's doing the deep dive to get value. It's for all of us to receive that and learn, because I learn just as much through someone's drama than my own, right? And so what does the process look like to be coached? How do you walk through a forum to do that the right way? What is the right process?
my presentation was last month. I was coached.
Your deep dive, you mean?
Son of a bitch. Yes.
Got you, dude. Even the pros can't get it right.
That's
Even
it.
the pros can't get it right.
Listen, I thought I was perfect. So when I was being coached for my deep dive, thank you, Eric.
There you go.
So a personal experience shared, the benefits, to jump to the benefit of a coach. We met ahead of time as we were figuring out what my deep dive was going to be. And we were at some chain restaurant down in Brentwood. We met there for an hour. And in the last 2 minutes of that, he goes, well, I think we just changed topics. And I just heard you say what I think the presentation's going to be, which was very different from where we started. I was like, it's 100. He goes, it only took us 58 minutes, Colton, but we got there at the end. And I loved it. So at least to jump to the outcome, that's the benefit. A third party, no forest for the trees, that can reflect on what's going on. And both the coach and you have this opportunity to really explore what's there and dig down in those layers. So you don't have to find your way there with the group. You've already had the opportunity to get down and know what you're exploring, so you can bring that to forum.
The thing that stands out to me about people who didn't get good coaching is when they have delivered the meat of their deep dive, and you get to the point where you're asking questions, and the first question is, now, what do you want out of this? That's something that often does not get expressed clearly when somebody's doing a deep dive. What kind of feedback what are you looking for here? What are you trying to solve? You've told us a lot of things, but we don't hear the one thing that's the problem that caused you to want to do this deep dive.
There's a worksheet that I've got that I've bastardized from some EO forum I pulled a while back, which has a series of questions where, it's the presenter's guide, and you have a coach's guide and a presenter's guide. And one of the things that the presenter fills out, it goes through and, it says, what's the headline? What do you want to get out of this presentation? What are the feelings associated, et cetera? And then describe the situation. And I love this list wherever I stole it from. But it's a grid of like 12 things, and it describes the situation. Are you between a rock and a hard place? Are you at a fork in the road? Are you at a mountaintop? Like it has all these like physical Are you drowning? Are you underwater? It has all these things that kind of helps it frame up the conversation for everybody else, which commonly helps with what template or what style of deep dive you're going to do, which is so helpful to, get the most out of it and then give context to the rest of the forum.
And this will be in the show notes, right?
Of course.
It's called the coaching worksheet, right?
And
we can put this other document you were talking about in the same PDF, so everybody has the same thing. Because there's a formal worksheet that you can use if you're the coach and you're coaching someone. You want to walk through that worksheet together. It really gives you the ability to kind of put your thoughts on paper and can get prepared, because, the purpose of coaching on the deep dive isn't to solve their problem, is it?
No, it's really, so great point and common misconception. You hear the term coach, right? And that's what people assume. And at the top of it says, your job is not to solve the problem. Your job is to define the problem, and a key phrase that they use now is not even relevance, but resonance. And that's really the goal of open coaching. Define the problem. And sometimes it's okay to do a presentation where they say, I don't know what outcome I'm expecting. Then at least defining it, I want to use this space, even though I don't know what the outcome is. I want to use this space to hear the perspective of others. I want to learn from others, and I want to explore this space together, which is totally acceptable. So yes, to clarify, coach, not your job to solve it. It is your job to help that person explore what are the depths of whatever it is that I want to deep dive on.
Right. And that coaching process, where I've seen, it seems to when I've coached before, what kind of shines the light for me is a lot of these problems are super complicated. And the presenter doing the deep dive, he's got a very complicated business, and maybe it's a very complicated decision tree they're walking through. And then, the whole forum has got to sit there and try to, uncover their complicated business and then complicated options he has to choose from. And so how does a good coach distill that down so it's so easier for them to navigate how to describe that complicated thing?
So whether I'm doing open coaching, which we can talk about, or even like for pre-planned presentations, I always love to do this where I say, hey man, what's the headline? And then the next thing I say is, what kind of experience shares do you want to hear from the group? I love it when those things change at the end, but that's the thing I keep trying to come back to, because that normally informs where you're headed, and it's like interesting check-in points along the way to help frame up the whole deep dive. Good gravy. I should know better at this point, but you got
to get that ready before you go to boot camp, or you're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah.
I'm already on the fence, to be honest with you. Not for myself, but for them. I barely made the cut.
I think the beauty of us doing these little tiny mistakes, because you've been in 15 years, you're going to do it, and we're all going to say this mistake. But I think over time we'll get better at it. So this is good. I'm glad you get to make the mistake too.
Hey, you can always count on me to make a few mistakes.
But the coaching process of being clear, so because ultimately, what you don't want to do in your form is confuse them. And, or with confusion, you go in the wrong direction. They're sitting here trying to figure out some complicated business strategy. And at the end of the day, you're talking about an emotion that you're trying to uncover and trying to.
Since you guys have a lot more experience in EO and a lot more gray hair, to be frank, have you guys?
I feel personally attacked.
You should. Was I unclear on that in some capacity?
I just feel glad I don't have glasses on.
I can't wait for this to go back and forth. A question for you both. Have you guys been a part of the deep dives, formerly presentations, where the person gets done and you notice that people are noticeably frustrated by, okay, so what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And you notice the emotions come up, and they just because, frame it up for me, and people can't do it, either because the person didn't think through it enough or wasn't coached well, right? Have you had that experience?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, in some cases don't even understand the details of what the problem is. Not necessarily what they're asking for, but you've left this confusing mess here. I think it's important for somebody to go into it and maybe over-explain even of all the players that are involved in why you're presenting.
Or something made complicated that isn't complicated at the same time, right? But you do need to just clear it up, and by the headline, by understanding that, could help clear the way for not only to be able to receive it, but to get to the meat, because you could spend a lot of time in the discovery process when it's not important. I mean, what's more important is hearing the experiences from other people in the forum that can share and help shine that. But if you're taking up all your time on the explanation of something that's often, what I have seen, we overcomplicate it for a deep dive. And, we're not trying to solve everything. We got to pick a problem. Like, we can't have 20, right? We got to pick one. How can you be a good coach when you're going in this deep dive conversation in the coaching practice? And it's like the entrepreneur's all over the place. He's got this problem. Is like, how do we pick one?
So one, in an ideal world, everyone's using their parking lot, right? Which is the number of issues that are high on importance, not necessarily on urgent. And what's great is when it's your time for your deep dive, your planned deep dive, you're able to go to the parking lot and you're going to pull that item, which means it should be fairly well defined at this point, at least the headline-wise, et cetera. A couple other things that I think are important. People, it is human nature to tell a story and give too many details, I believe. And especially in this situation where commonly on a deep dive, it's a lot of times far more EQ than IQ, the details of it do not matter. It doesn't matter when people are, hang on, was it March or was it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what month it was when we're talking about that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's get to the feelings. Sure, maybe the outcome, or also like, what is it we're actually exploring here rather than the exact date or this detail? The only time where that shifts is if it's one of those like IQ topics and it's a situation where it's like, I have got to revamp my company in terms of, I've got a partner that's departing and I'm trying to figure out what do I do with the operation. Sure, those are the elements where, details might matter. But I'd say 80% of the presentations, you don't need to get lost in the details.
And, it is helpful if you do have a deck or something to hand out. So if you're trying to describe something verbally when a picture could do that easily, so you could just put it up, that has helped me before, especially because a lot of the entrepreneurs, they have multiple businesses, they have multiple layers, and then there's a nuance inside their own organization that creates all kinds of drama that maybe an org chart, printed for everyone to look at describes a better version of what they're truly trying to find.
It really does, and I think that's one of the benefits of the coach presentation, which, you're making me think I should revamp what is on my bastardized coaches worksheet. There should be something like what materials would be helpful for this presentation. Because you're 100% right. We had something in the past several years about this where somebody had questions about cash flow, and it was cash flow and then org chart, et cetera. And they were able to provide those kind of documents and even give it to us ahead of time. So everybody came in reviewed. So we weren't burning precious time with someone walking through that. And it was like a homework assignment where everybody came in with questions and things highlighted to understand what was going on, which is so helpful, and you get deeper quicker.
So I heard you use this earlier, maybe it was the first episode, open coaching versus live coaching. What's the difference?
Open coaching works really well for unplanned presentations. So when you're in forum, and forum typically starts with 5% reflections, formerly called monthly updates, and you're going to pull a topic out of that is high on important and hopefully high on urgent. What I call like the back half of the meeting, 5% reflection. Then you do like an hour planned presentation. If you've got 2 hours left in your agenda, you can do 1, 2, or 3 impromptus, which would have open coaching, which is you pulled a topic from your 5%, and then you're going to talk about processing a cancer diagnosis. My number 2 just left last week. I've got to, or something celebratory, and you're trying to figure out what to do with opportunity, right? Open coaching is the first 10 minutes of that, where you're basically, it's similar to what you would do in a planned presentation. It's just expedited and truncated, and it has a special set of rules to it for success right there. So,
and what is that? When you say special set of rules, what do you mean by that?
One, it matters a lot on the skill set of the open coach. Some people like to rotate that. I think that there are individuals that are better suited for open coaching, high EQ, natural curiosity. You also have to have an element of confrontation. It's one of the things that I make. And I say that you need to be comfortable interrupting people is a way that I've said it. I've found the greatest success in being able to interrupt because people are likely to follow details and stuff like that. And you got to be able to interrupt, especially if it's an emotional story, and say, hey, I want to jump up. I want to get back on track for a second. Oh, I'm worried we're rabbit holing. Because otherwise people take 8-10 minutes talking about the details and never get into the meat.
Right. So that's a good description of using that. And during that coaching process, something that, tell us some good tips to prevent a coach trying to solve their problem, or trying, what language do we use to better get them to get the format to explain more about what their pain points are? Like what language questions, to walk us through best practices there. Because sometimes we're problem solvers, right? Have you tried this? Have you tried that?
Already out. Also breaking Gestalt, now known as forum mindset.
Oh,
so
the
difference,
word. We'll get to that later. Go ahead.
The difference between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. So that right there is the basic of, if I was going to say what's the one thing that makes for great open coaching, open-ended questions. If I can answer your question with a yes or a no, that's a bad question. So, or a single word answer. right? There is, let me caveat, right at the beginning of open coaching where you're just trying to get facts, which you should not spend a lot of time on, right? That is a time, okay, so what is your head count? All right, what's your revenue goal for this year? There's a couple of those that can be helpful, which is, okay, head count 15, revenue goal, 4.5 million. That's fine. However, you got to get into the open-ended questions, which aren't leading questions. Have you tried this yet? Nope. You're not even, oh gosh, you shouldn't even do that in experience shares because that's a leading question. Open-ended questions. How do you feel about? What's your relationship? What would it look like if? All of those you cannot answer with a yes or no. And commonly it's a part of what you're thinking, but you're not giving the person the opportunity to explore the space if you're giving them just a simple yes or no.
What kind of evidence do you have as a coach that you're on the right track when you're coaching? What's something that's a telltale sign that, hey, I'm pretty good at this coaching thing?
I'd say body language, pauses. I would argue, if commonly you in the open coaching wind up at a different spot from where you started, which is why I bookend open coaching over 7 minutes and I say, hey, give me the 1-sentence headline. I don't say, hey, tell me about the situation. Give me the 1-sentence headline. It would be at the top of the newspaper. And then what are the types of experiences you'd like to hear from the group? Is number 2. And then 3, I say, give me 3 emotions that are related to this topic. I close, not with the feelings, but I close with, even without going to the headline, I just close with, what are the types of experiences that you'd like to hear from this group? And when that changes over time, I feel like you've done some really good work. It doesn't have to happen, but it's definitely indicative of doing some really good work to dive deeper.
Yeah, and those pauses could look like, them thinking. Often we have this thing in the back of our head. We're like, it's an issue, it's a problem. I gotta tackle this, and I put it on the parking lot, and now I'm got to do the coaching. I don't even think about it outside of that forum, right? Not until you get into the actual coaching session, and then someone's asking your questions. You're like, oh, I haven't thought of that. We don't often really in our minds just go too deep like a coach would unlock that cabinet inside of us to pull out those things that we've had hidden, those tough questions that make us think about. Yeah, I'm probably struggling with this because somebody bullied me when I was 14 years old, and now I am resisting this thing because of that thing from way, a long time ago, right?
What are the questions that you guys have either used or heard in forum that have been really great, thought-provoking questions?
It always is like, how does that make you feel saying that in front of someone else? Because sometimes we're different people with different people, and different experiences are different for lots of people. But for me, it's getting them to describe their issue in front of someone they would not normally want to describe it to, because that involves that person.
Ellie Bird has a really great question bank through the Forum Sherpa site, and for all I know, it's floating out there somewhere that you can download. But it's got about 25 questions to it, and I love this question bank. But there's a number of specific questions I love, like 1 year from now, what would you like to be able to say about this situation? Especially if there's some tension or something else, or just you ask, hey, what would the closest loved one to you say about this? What would they say back to you? What would your business partner say if they were in the room and you had to leave? There's a couple questions like that are pretty consistent that get people to go, oh, okay. Like a lot of times, especially in like a really tense situation, empathy falls for folks, and forcing them to think through what that other person's going to say sometimes can be a little more revealing.
Wow, that's really good. I think back after my first coaching experience, I recognized how important that process would look like in my own business with people that I was coaching, employees that were trying to navigate an issue, and I would find myself trying to solve their problem, right? And learning the coaching practice that they teach us with coaching another peer, right? You realize that getting someone to solve their own problems is powerful. when they solve their own problem, they are the solution, right? By telling someone, Colton, man, been there, done that, dude. This is what I would do. Trust me, this is what you do. It does not resonate and does not have the punching power that self-discovery of the solution on their own.
Well said. Is this your segue into Gestalt? No, sorry. Go.
No, for me, that question, what outcome would you like to see, is always shocking to me. It's like, oh wow, I don't know. I've just been talking about the problem. I haven't really thought about what the ideal solution might possibly be.
Yeah,
it really has woken me up a number of times. And I also feel when we get into these deep questions that are open ended, there are times where, man, it feels like I'm being grilled. I guess it's probably a thing for me. Maybe it's childhood trauma, like you've described. It's like, man, I feel like I'm being attacked here. But it's, at the end of the day, it's those questions that nobody else is ever going to ask me about this. I think that's part of the beauty of Forum. You're gonna get, and with the help of these questions that we're going to be provided in the show notes, you can be great too.
It is called a deep dive.
Yeah.
I don't think you're doing good coaching work unless you go deep.
You gotta,
and you gotta ask the questions that you're gonna feel uncomfortable asking some of these, because it could go a little hairy, and that's why I think it's really important too. Is like, getting to that trust level with the person you're coaching first. It could be very difficult to do a proper coaching with a brand new formate that you don't know. And you're with this person. How do you go deep with someone that you don't really know? You haven't had an experience with a retreat together. You haven't had much time, and you're still both putting that front of everything's great, right? And so figuring out a way to get deep and vulnerable is really important. And maybe that involves telling a story about some of your own pain or your own struggle that you can share to open up that vulnerability box that exists and get them to start pulling out and getting the deep out of that.
Can I share with you a way to exploit that new relationship?
Exploit. Well, that sounds really conniving and okay,
it
let's
is.
Exploit.
So I think there's a real benefit to not having a deep relationship with someone that you are coaching for a planned presentation or doing an open coaching, because I'm slipping in some of the new terms as we've discussed. Shoshin, SHOSHIN, is one of the things that EO is saying is one of the fundamental tenets of Forum, which is I think it's a Japanese term for beginner's mindset. And the phrase there is that to the beginner there are many options, or to the student there are many options, to the expert there are few. And it's the simple concept of, like, if you think you know it all or you have been through it, you're already like, we can dismiss that. It's really going to be one of these three things because I've got enough experience. Whereas the beginner's mindset and this idea that you are always going to start out with things with the world of possibility, and you're going to spend more time exploring than you are dismissing, which is a difficult concept for some. But that's when I talk about exploiting the new relationship, I mean taking advantage of that newness where you don't even have to pretend. You literally are going to be asking these questions. So really the limiting factor you talked about there is transparency and vulnerability. But the benefit is, especially if there's already been, kind of the cadence of relationship in there and someone's already been transparent, then really acting kind of like a reporter that's on the live, or a good podcast host such as yourself that knows how to ask questions. It can be, actually very disarming if people are picking up on empathy and whatnot through that. And then you're using the fact that, hey, I'm kind of ignorant to this. I really want to know more, can be very inviting if you get that tone just right.
Mm. Well, let's go on the flip side here. What does a bad coaching experience feel like?
I was going to say what Eric shared, but I don't want to say that he's had bad coaching experiences. I've been a part, and I've seen it, where sometimes folks get defensive because it gets a lot of, well, why haven't you done that? So man, I got hit with a tax bill that was double. I owe $120K in taxes this year, and the open coach or even the questions, just as people are trying to find the experience shares, starts to put that person on the defensive. And then sometimes they may or may not say, guys, all right, I feel like an idiot now that I haven't, because all of the line of questioning is, well, did they not tell you about quarterly payments? Well, have you guys, what tax bracket are you in? Well, what did you pay in taxes last year? There's lots of things like that where the tone and intonation can really make someone kind of back up. And I've watched it happen where I watch someone start to put up walls as it goes along because they're like, everybody knows more than me and I look like an idiot. They're surprised that I don't know the answer to this question.
Yeah, and I could see how no one wants to feel stupid. Yeah. But we sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day that we do stupid things that we can't explain. It makes no sense that, clearly we've gotten ourselves in this situation, but, a good coach would maybe go deep. Would someone go even deeper? It's like, go into that. Well, obviously the first thing out of my mind is a terrible thing. Well, who's your accountant? He's like, who's doing this work behind the scenes? And let's find out why you're so bad.
One of the things I like to do whenever and here's the reason, when I'm modeling open coaching for groups that I'm facilitating a retreat for, there's part of it that's best practices and whatnot. So I'll commonly open coach through 1, 2, 3 presentations in like 20, 30 minutes. It's very quick. One of the things I do in that space is I'll have my notepad out or whatever, and I kind of pretend like I'm asking straight up questions or whatever, when really I'm not. I go, hey, let me get a couple facts about the situation. And then I go into it, and it really kind of frees up the judgment, right? What did you pay in taxes last year? If you know, what did you, and there's just it's why EQ comes into play, because there's kind of reading the other person. And if you notice that body language where they're starting to back up and cross their arms, and you know what I mean? All of the body language elements of like closing down versus sitting up, leaning up, feeling like you're a guide rather than an interrogator is that key to making sure. And I wasn't trying to speak disparagingly. It sounds like you've had a real depth. And sometimes people can be really honest, but it still kind of backs you up because they're really getting you to maybe look at things from a different perspective without being aggressive. Mm-hmm. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that okay?
That's accurate.
Okay.
And so, do you pick the coach?
I say that I let folks do that, especially if they, if someone, I commonly, I'll have folks, especially if it's financial, tax, et cetera, if one of those topics, investing, yada, 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 in my group, I'll say, hey, Bo, you're better for this one, because he's a wealth management guy. So he knows so much more, and he can put it together and understand and interpret faster. And so in our forum and most forums, I say, hey, you can pick a coach. Otherwise, and this is very much like not EO standard, this is Colton Mulligan standard, I have a default open coach, which is someone that has a demonstrated ability to have high EQ, ask really great questions, and able to navigate and doesn't mind cutting people off and has a repeated history of helping people get to the 5% quickly. They're the default, unless at the end of the presentation you say, hey, do you want Colton to do it? Or do you think you got is there somebody else you'd rather have open coach this time?
That's an excellent advice there. Because everyone has a different quality they can bring to the table doing those processes. Now, let's think about. So usually you're going to do a coaching exercise prior to to your form meeting. Is there any particular time frame that makes sense? Do you want to do it closer to the form meeting, let's say a week prior, or does it even matter? Am I making that too complicated? But it seems like for everyone's benefit that you would want to do it closer to the form meeting so it's more fresh, or what are your thoughts? Because I could see, I've experienced myself where you're doing the coaching and you're going to present the deep dive to the form and you're like, shit, I can hardly remember what the issue was because it was 3 weeks ago, right?
I feel like 72 hours in advance is a good basic time frame, because if things shift over the coaching, you have time to rethink whatever it was, like the experience share I had where I talked for 58 minutes, and at the end, in the last 2 minutes, we figured out what it was, which got me to reframe my preparation for how I was going to share. And then likewise, if you find there's resources that you need to get in there, hang on, I got to get with my tax guy to get last year's returns, this, that, or the other. Let me go find my operating agreement. So the day before, the morning of, bad idea. 72 hours in advance, good. And I think you're making a fair point. Depending on the nature of the topic, a week before might work if it's this large, like, existential question that you've got or something you've wrestled with your entire life. Most likely, that would work. But yeah, it sucks to show up and be like, shit, all right, we talked. It was 10 days ago. I can't even remember. You know what I mean? So
now let's talk specifically your form meeting, okay, and best practices. And I realize it's like this in my form, but I'm learning here, so maybe there's people are doing it different ways.
What a great beginner's mindset we're seeing demonstrated right here.
I'm so beginner. I am the rookie here. In my experience, it has been that the coach will open up the deep dive and present the deep dive to the form, and then kind of introduce the formate to then talk about and answer questions. Why is it like that? Why am I not starting the deep dive and just talking about me? Why a coach doing that?
I think the coach has this benefit of understanding a lot of the salient points and packaging things up well. Forest for the trees analogy. And they, and like what the coach setting the stage, I think it's 2-3 minutes. It's what I can normally recommend. And they're doing, what's the headline? And I make it a very clear formula. What's the headline? What are the types of experiences they'd like to hear from the group? 3 important facts, 3 feelings that the person shared. And then I also normally have an I notice, something in that space where it's like, my reflection was I saw a lot of tension. I saw physical hand wringing as I was coaching Eric through this thing. I noticed that he got most excited when he was talking about his kids. And as he's doing his future life plan, I noticed that that's the area that really got him excited. Something like that the presenter themselves would not be able to share on their own.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Any best practices when walking through describing the deep dive? I mean, is that something that one should worry about practicing beforehand, or what kind of tips can you give a coach so they do that right? Because they're not just wing it. Because this really has to be well thought out.
Oh, don't wing it. Oh, yeah. The group, you are going to do the group a disservice if you just plan on winging it. And the 3 of us know, because we talked about it before the podcast, we can wing it, which is great in some context. When you have 8 people who have very valuable time, don't just wing it in the offhand chance that you are not as efficient as you'd like to be, and it will be better if you prepare. EO has one. Likewise, in the show notes, I'm happy to put in there my bastardized coach's worksheet, presenter's worksheet. What's great, you fill it out ahead of time, just read the damn worksheet. And that it does just those things. And if you took the time to fill it out, you're going to read out the blanks of what you had. And in 2-3 minutes, you are going to do a fantastic job packaging what the topic is for the day.
Does it make sense or to catch up with him on a call the day of, just to have a little summary? Hey, I know you're driving in. This is what I'm prepared to present it. This is how, are you cool with me saying it like this? Is that helpful?
I've done that in the past, particularly when I've reflected on something and there was a change.
Because I could see there could be a change from a week ago. Yeah. Something could be totally different.
I don't have any best practice around that, but I could have you guys done. I've seen benefit to that.
Yep. So coaching, anything that I've left off or I didn't ask about coaching that would make a lot of sense to bring to the table. So because the purpose of this podcast and this episode 2 is something that you could listen to in the car on the way to go do your coaching with someone, to kind of prep you and prepare you for what that experience should look like. Because it should feel like at the end of a coaching session, like what would you like? How would, as a coach, how should I feel when I know it was successful?
You got 2 questions in there, and so one thing I failed to mention, which you were saying, hey, anything else we should keep in mind? Open coaching or planned presentation, planned deep dive coaching that's key is make sure you really focus on what are the types of experiences you'd like to hear from the group. Right, that's really the thing that helps everybody best. And then I try and define 2, typically. So I try and find one thing that is the most specific to what's going on, and then I try to do one layer up in case you don't have that is most related to the feelings and the type of situation that we talked about. So, hey, do you feel like you're drowning? Do you feel like you're at a fork in the road? Do you feel like you're a rock in a hard place? Things like that. And so that way, if folks say, so you say, man, I'm having a real issue with my spouse because she just will not face the facts about her relationship with her father, right? Call it that. Well, if there's people in the group and somebody says, I would like experience shares about a time you have encountered a spouse about their relationship with their parent. Well, maybe there's people that aren't in a significant relationship right there, right? So I normally do that one. What's the most specific and relevant? And then I back up and give one more that's a little higher. Hey, what's a time when you really cared about someone and you'd been putting off a conversation and you knew you wanted to confront them in their own best interests about a behavior that you're hoping they'll change, right? So I just gave 2 options that make it accessible rather than somebody going, I don't have a spouse, so I guess I'm out on this one.
Right. That's excellent. Colton, thank you. Thanks, Eric. That is episode 2 of The Decision.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.